In this video, we're talking all about the Poison Necro. It's quirky, it's niche, it's fun. And I really wanted to make a sort of video like this because I'm honestly super juiced for Diablo 2 Resurrected. Like, my asshole's fucking clenched and ready for this shit. So, let's just jump in and be sure to skip to any parts you want in the chapters below. Now, let's talk a little bit about why you'd pick the Poison Necro. Well, Poison Necro can actually deal some very impressive damage, and still have points left over to throw into your other skills. And that's pretty helpful because Necro has so many good skills. It's just a really flexible build, and that makes it more fun, of course. Poison Nova is your main ability, and it has such a nice radius to it. It's super massive. It's definitely a good thing going for the Poison Necro. Poison Nova is also really unique in the way it deals damage. Now, if we take a look here, Poison Nova does damage over 2 seconds, and that 2 seconds is fixed. It'll never change. But when you look at other poison skills, such as Poison Dagger, it deals damage over 20 seconds. The number might be higher, but it deals that over 20 seconds. So overall, the DPS is not as good as it would be on Poison Nova. And that is extremely good for Poison Nova, and it's like the main reason why Poison Necro doesn't suck complete ass. I also want to talk a little bit about Poison Nova itself. It's just such a beautiful skill. I have so much fun spamming and using the shit out of this ability. And that, I know that's not like exactly a pro, but shit, come on, look at this. Like, it's kind of a pro because it's fucking fun to use. And now let's talk a little bit about the cons behind this character, because boy oh boy, this character definitely has some cons, but they can all be countered. So let's dive in here. So the number one con behind this character is definitely the fact that he is so gear dependent. Like, this character has some pretty expensive gear, but man oh man, does he do some really impressive things with this gear. So that's definitely a big con. And another con is probably that this character isn't like the best at boss killing, but at the same time, that could be countered with your mercenary. And if he has good gear, this isn't like the best gear, but it's like, just for example, this is pretty good gear. And of course, poison immunes are pretty annoying, but they can also be countered with corpse explosion and revives and your mercenary. Now, let's go over builds. But before I go into the items exactly, we need to discuss 75 faster cast rate versus 125 faster cast rate. Because Poison Nova is pretty unique in terms of the nature of the damage it deals, because it's over 2 seconds. So if I'm over here spamming the shit out of Poison Nova, this won't deal more damage if I'm casting it quicker, because it deals damage over 2 seconds. So 75 faster cast rate is actually quite a good approach when it comes to killing speed, compared to 125 faster cast rate. But 125 faster cast rate shouldn't be like completely overlooked, because of course you can teleport quicker, corpse explode quicker, and stuff like that. So ultimately, I believe it's the context of the content that you're fighting. So let's say if you're fighting like cows or chaos plus river of flame, you're not going to be teleporting a lot because you go right into the action. So 75 faster cast rate isn't bad there. But if you're doing something like pits, you might want to do 125 faster cast rate, because you really have to TP all the way over there, and you teleport quicker with 125 faster cast rate, of course. And with that said, let's get into the build. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the build. Just please remember that this is no budget, top of the end gear. We'll go over budget later, but for now, let's just dive in. So Death's Web is 100% necessary for this build. It was made for this build. You want this item. As soon as you get this item, this character turns into this character pretty much. You deal very respectable damage. Trangs, irreplaceable. The skill the poison skill damage, the FCR, the res, the curses, it's too good. 2 SOJs or 2 BK rings, it's up to you. Arax is really good because of the faster cast rate and all skills. Tri-res boots, because this build could lack res a little bit. You could make up for it with the diadem and the amulet as well. But yeah, I recommend tri-res boots with maybe faster hit rate or recovery, anything really. A 220 Necro amulet. This is really hard to get, but almost you can't really replace it. You can have a 215 for this setup because we get 80 faster cast rate in total. But yeah, it's so good. I don't really recommend anything else. And over here we have a 220, 2 open socket. This is also insanely good because not only do you get 2 skills and 20 faster cast rate, but there's 2 sockets in it. And that's really good for the poison damage. And of course, Enigma for the teleport, very necessary. And one of the best options for this character, definitely in the shield slot, is the J mod with 4 facets in it. This is such a huge, insane buff to your damage that I strongly recommend trying to get something like this. It also doesn't have to be a J mod. It could just be a 4 open socket shield or a jeweler's monarch. With instead of deflecting, it could have faster hit recovery or life to it. It's pretty flexible, but in the shield slot, I recommend something like this. And before we move on, I want to mention Bramble. Now, Bramble is actually a pretty good choice. It does require an ohm and a sur, but it could be pretty decent if you don't like teleporting. I know people don't really like Enigma. They don't want that sort of playstyle. Then I would recommend Bramble for you. You will deal more damage, but you lose the teleport. Teleport is pretty essential for this character. So do so wisely, but you could still have teleports. With on Switch, I run CTA and Spirit, of course, but you can replace that with a teleport staff, and Naj's Puzzler is definitely the best teleport staff. But yeah, that's Bramble, and that's this build. Also, inventory full of life, all res, and skills. A lot of faster hit recovery. You need faster hit recovery charms with this build too. Now we're going to go over the 125 faster cast rate setup for this build. You just replace the J-mod with the spirits and then put 1 extra 10 faster cast rate ring, and that'll get you over the 100, or it'll get you to the 125 faster cast rate breakpoint. But remember, if you're running a 15 faster cast rate ring or amulet here, then you're going to have to get a 20, or you could run another 10 faster cast rate ring. That'll get you to 130 or anything above 125. And you could also alternatively run this. And then you can run this. You don't need the faster cast rate ring if you run this, Suicide Branch Burnt Wand. Now this gives you 50 faster cast rate, and it lets you socket it with a facet, so you still get some extra damage in there. But the problem with this is that you won't deal as much damage with Death's Web. But that's okay because you're running the J mod here. The J mod is like almost a replacement, but it also like almost kind of isn't. You're dealing less damage. The main pro to this setup is the fact that you have an actual good shield for max block. Now, something I wanted to mention are rare rings here. Now, you want to pick up every single rare ring that you find because there's potential that it will be worth a ton or just be super helpful for your character. These are pretty good examples, but stats that you want to look for in these rare rings are faster cast rate. That's the most important one. Magic Find, if you want to make a Magic Find character out of this, and it's a good Magic Find character, so it's pretty important. Any resistances, strength, life, dexterity, energy, It also has like damage reduced and magic damage reduced by a numerical amount. Those are pretty good. Also, let's talk a little bit about crafted amulets. So to craft a caster amulet, you need a jewel, a perfect amethyst, and an amulet, and a Ral rune. The amulet has to be at least item level 90 to have +2 skills in whatever class you want. In our case, the Necro. And your character, the one who crafts the amulet, has to be level 93. So I don't recommend really hunting for the gear to be able to craft, but if you see like a Ral rune, I recommend picking that up and then hoarding them so you can craft a bunch to see if you could get some good amulets. Now let's talk a little bit about magic find setups. So first we're going to go over 75 faster cast rate setups and then the 125 faster cast rate setups, which is definitely a little harder, especially if you want to include shako. But yeah, we'll go over that in a second. But for 75 faster cast rate, definitely like to run Shrings, the faster cast rate rings with Arax. It'd be nice if the faster cast rate rings also had some magic find to them. Be sure to keep your eye out for that. War Travs, Jmod for the damage with Death's Web, 220 here. This could also be 15 faster cast rate. Shako with the perfect diamond or an ist, and the Enigma. Now this setup definitely has more damage than the next setup that we're going to go over. And it has max block from the Jmod. But here's the next setup. Gold wrap, and this is the recipe to upgrade it, because if you don't upgrade it, you're only going to have 3 belt slots, and that's actually pretty annoying. And then you can run Nagels, or you could potentially get magic rings, or any sort of ring with more magic find instead of the Nagels here. So this setup also has 75 faster cast rate. It requires a 20 here, 20 faster cast rate. This setup prioritizes more with magic find itself, but you sacrifice damage and you don't have max block. Now let's go over a 125 faster cast rate setup. For this one, you're going to be using Suicide Branch. This might be a little weird because there's no Death's Web, of course, but as I mentioned, you'll still deal plenty of damage with the Jmod. Shako, 220, and the rest of the gear right here. And for the rings, of course, try to include some MF. Now, I wanted to go over another setup. If you obtain a diadem that has magic find on it, you can put some perfect topazes in there. And this setup will definitely be okay because you can include Death's Web in it now. And you can sacrifice 1 faster cast rate ring as well. And this will all add up to 125 faster cast rate. And of course, try to include Geeds with magic find charms.
Help!
Oh,
Help me!
there he goes, screaming for help. I love
Help!
the Necro's help command. It's so fucking funny. And he certainly needs help for this next section because we're talking about budgets. Now, budget is definitely an awkward topic for this character because you are so gear dependent. So here's what I recommend doing. You actually want to start out with bone, because when you start out with bone, you can deal some pretty decent damage. You could also start with summon, and I recommend respecking into poison once you get at least the minimum gear required, and I'll go over that in a second. But first, I want to answer, but what if I want to be poisoned since the very start of my character? You could definitely do that. You're going to be melee until level 6, though, because that's when you get Poison Dagger. You're still melee, but now you have a poison skill at least. So, you're going to be maxing this out, and eventually you're going to get Poison Explosion, and you need to grab Corpse Explosion too. So the playstyle here is you tag something with Poison Dagger, run around, jerk off, wait till it dies, whatever you tagged, and then use poison explosion and corpse explosion on everything until it dies, pretty much. Um, and it can be quite a painful process, this playstyle, but let me tell you, once you hit Poison Nova using this playstyle, it's actually a very, very satisfying feeling because you finally have like a decent skill, as opposed to just a single target poke and then relying on corpse explosion and everything else, you know? So yeah, definitely recommend sticking with bone. You could do summon until you get this gear right here. 3-piece strings. Very, very important for this character because of the way poison damage works in this game. Minus enemy poison res is essential for pretty much any poison character. And the best way to get this with this character is with 3-piece Trangs. Now, Trang's set is really good because you get a bunch of res, strength, dex, life, cannot be frozen, mana, of course the FCR, the poison skill damage. Trang's gloves are on every single one of these builds, in case you haven't noticed. The glove slot cannot be replaced here. And yeah, let's go over the rest of the gear too. Tri-res boots, of course. It doesn't have to be tri-res, it could be any res. And I have a Nagels here. You could have anything here, really. And you need at least one FCR jewelry with this setup to have 75 faster cast rate. And now let's talk a little bit about rune words. When it comes to rune words and this build on a budget, stealth is probably one of the top ones. Lore is also extremely good because you get skills, energy, mana per kill, and light res. And light res is really important because with the Trang setup, you're actually missing light res. You get fire res, poison, cold, no light. So this is like the missing puzzle piece where you get light res. It's very nice. You get Ort Sol from Nightmare Countess, by the way, and Taleth from Normal Countess. Taleth is just super good because you get faster run walk and cast rate and hit recovery, even mana. It's just super good for very, very easy runes. Also, run walk is extremely important for this character, like on a budget, because once you cast Poison Nova, I like to run to a better position to use my next Poison Nova, or to try to group enemies together for corpse explosion, stuff like that. And white is the next rune word that you want to make. Now, IO can be a little hard to get because it has a 1 or 3% drop rate from Countess, but that's okay because it's worth it. So Dole IO in a wand. Now, I know bone wands and any wand above that, like Lich Wand, has a 2 maximum and minimum socket socket tree right here. Like you can only have 2 sockets available here. Jesus. And white's really good because you get 3 to poison skills, poison and bone skills, and 20 FCR. You get some other like decently useful things, but the main thing here is the 20 FCR and skills. You can also get some decent staff mods that come with this. Like you can make a white out of a poison +3 to poison Nova base. Some other skills that would be good would be corpse explosion, lower res, revive, stuff like that. And let's quickly mention some replacement gear. This is all decent replacement gear. Trang's armor would be really nice because then you can replace the belt. Like if you get a Rax, I would definitely recommend a setup like this. Maybe because you lose cannot be frozen, but yeah. This is a good helm if you're just starting to magic find. I recommend making something like this. Skin of Viper Magi is probably my #1 recommended like replacement armor. Like if you're not gonna run stealth, you should probably run this. You do lose the run walk, which I think actually really sucks, because run walk's very underrated on this character. And yeah, you just pretty much want to run this gear until you can get things like Death's Web, 220, Shako, Arax, the J mod or Spirit Shield, things like that. And before we move on, let's talk about Merc gear and one rune word. This is probably your best budget setup for the Merc. Insight's just really good for the meditation aura. Treachery's insanely good. It requires a Lem rune, but it's just so good. You get IAS, faster hit recovery, and the Fade and Venom are very nice too. Excuse me. And you get Talrash's helm here because it's just probably the best budget helm out there. It's insanely strong. Let's talk about the Bone rune word real quick. AKA waste of 2 runes for this build, because like I would really recommend stealth here instead for the run walk and faster cast rate. Bone is a good rune word, but for this build, I just don't really recommend it. I would recommend holding on to your runes and not really wasting them. So when it comes to this character, at this point, you're going to be running cows. Cows and pits. Those are definitely the top 2 things this character does. And once you can also do things like chaos and potentially key running, minus nil attack because there's a lot of poison immunes. Of course, on Switch, I would recommend a teleport staff, and this is the best teleport staff, but you could also just shop a teleport staff. Next, we'll be talking about Poison Dagger. Look at the way that the Necro runs with the Poison Dagger. He's just ready to shank something. I love that. I also wanted to mention really briefly, when it comes to PvP, that requires its whole own video. So let me know if you want to see that. But for now, let's go over Poison Dagger. Now, I definitely recommend Black Bog Sharp as probably being the best dagger for this. If you do want to run Poison Dagger, I just want to make a quick disclaimer, like, I don't think you should bother with a Poison Dagger setup. I definitely think you should just stick with Poison Nova. It's just so much better. But let's talk about Poison Dagger real quick, because it actually has a really cool, unique mechanic with Venom. Now, the best way to get Venom, in my opinion, is through Treachery. You get a level 15 Venom. And the unique mechanic that Poison Dagger has with Venom is that the Venom damage is applied over the duration of Poison Dagger. And that can actually equate to some really like nasty damage numbers. And it's actually pretty cool. But like I said, though, Poison Nova does its damage over a fixed 2 seconds, so I think Poison Nova is just better. But this setup is still like fun. I just don't know if I would really recommend it. Now let's talk a little bit about skill tree. Now, when it comes to the skills, this character has an insane amount of flexibility, because to its core, the only thing you really need is Poison Nova and its synergies, and that'll require points here, the prerequisites, and you definitely need lower res also, so you're going to get all these curses also. And that's like the main minimum that you need for this character. And what I do is I always grab Clay Golem and Golem Mastery with Summon Resist. Clay Golem is actually insanely good, especially for like bosses, or like if you're on a budget. Against certain enemies in certain groups, what you do is like you spam Poison Nova, and your Golem, when he dies, you just re-summon him. It's like you have an infinite like tank pretty much that slows enemies around you. It's actually very convenient. And of course, you're grabbing 1 point into revive. And with this, you have a lot of skill points left over. And I recommend maxing out Corpse Explosion, of course. It's one of the strongest abilities in the game. Definitely recommend that. And then I like to max out lower res because of the larger radius, and it also does subtract more res the more points you put into it. So it's kind of nice, but the main reason I do it is for the really massive radius. It's really cool casting lower res, and then I teleport like a screen away, and something's lower res. I'm like, wow, that's cool. That's one less spell I have to cast. It's actually pretty convenient. But I know other people like to put points into skeletons, and that's pretty cool. Um, I just have a different play style. People like to put points into revive after that, like max it out, or the bone armor synergies right here. That's not bad either. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about Poison Nova skill rotation. Because you're going to be teleporting around. If you have Bramble, you might be teleporting around. You might be running. But the premise is the same. You want to get to a decent spot because of the way Poison Nova is. It's locked around your character. You want to cast lower res and then Poison Nova. You might have to cast multiple, depending on the group of enemies. And then Corpse Explosion as soon as there's a dead body. And the skill rotation won't be the same for every group of enemies. And what I mean by that is, like, depending on your gear and the player count, you might not even need lower res. You could probably just kill some enemies outright with the Poison Nova. Like, with this setup right here, I have so much poison damage and minus enemy poison res that there's going to be, I don't have to cast lower res for a large amount of groups. Another hint is, like, when you're teleporting around, because I have a massive lower res radius, I like to maybe cast it and then teleport to my Poison Nova location. And another hint is that against certain enemies, you might want to cast Amplified Damage before Corpse Explosion. Now, this is probably true for enemies that are like fire resistant. Okay, let's talk a little bit about mercenaries. Now, when it comes to the mercenary, make sure you don't get the Act 2 Nightmare defensive Merc because he has the Holy Freeze aura, which is super good, but unfortunately, it ruins corpses when enemies die, and that means you can't corpse explode everywhere. That's not good. You don't want that. So what I recommend is the Act 2 Nightmare offensive Merc because he has the Might aura, which not only makes his damage better, but it makes your revives damage also better. So yeah, that's definitely the right approach. You could also do a different Act 2 Merc. It's up to you pretty much, but I like the Might. So this is probably one of the better setups. Of course, Infinity. Infinity is just way too good. The Conviction aura lets your revives and your Merc hit things easier. It lowers enemies' fire res also, which is really convenient because of your Corpse Explosion. It unfortunately doesn't lower poison res, but that's okay because it already does so much other things. That'd be so overpowered if it lowered poison res. Fortitude for the defense. This could be a better base. You could like get an e-bugged base or something like that. That would be really strong. And of course, I like the Vamp Gaze with the Cham rune in it for the Cannot Be Frozen. This is like one of the better setups. Yeah, the Merc's job is pretty much just to like be the boss killer. So I recommend probably trying to get even more Crushing Blow on here, but I really like this setup, so I would recommend a setup like this. But when it comes to other gear, you could definitely run Andes, Goulians for the Crushing Blow, Duress for the Crushing Blow, Rattle Cage also for the Crushing Blow. Yeah. Now, when it comes to revives, I definitely recommend Urdars. Urdars have good damage, and I think they have a 5% chance of Crushing Blow, which is really nice. Hell Lords have good damage too. Trav council members are super good because they synergize with your lower res. Doom Knights are also pretty good for the lower res synergy. Now let's talk about the best content available for this character. And just a quick reminder, if you're going to be doing something like pits, I recommend trying to run something like 125 faster cast rate because you get to teleport to the pits quicker. And you get to just run through the pit and teleport through it and just plow through everything and try to kill everything as quickly as possible. And pits, everything in the pits is pretty easy to kill, so be sure to refer to my 125 faster cast rate magic find chapter. The best content for this character are pits, chaos, cows, and key running, in my opinion. That's definitely what this character is like thrives at, in my opinion. But if you have my 75 faster cast rate killing setup, you can do literally all the content in this game. Some of the content would be rough, like Bale. Bale Wave 4 is poison immune, but if with amplified damage and corpse explosion, and your mercenary and revives, of course, it's very possible. You could do Mausoleum, Ancient Tunnels, Worldstone Keep could be a little bit rough, but again, just use the corpse explosion and amplify damage when necessary. River of Flame can spawn some poison immunes, but Corpse Explosion can definitely do the trick. Yeah, you can definitely do all the content if you have the gear. That's the really important thing here. A lot of people write this build off as not being the best, but I hope this video was able to convince you of its power. And just a last note, I'm gonna make more videos, so be sure to criticize my shit. Like if I know I said so many times in this fucking video, and I apologize about that, but hopefully I'll get better as time moves on. And if also, just a note, if you made it this far, you're definitely a Poison Nova fan, or about to be. So let me know what you think of the Poison Nova in Diablo 2 Remastered, because I honestly still don't really know how to feel about it. And with that being said, have a gorgeous day.